welcome back to another edition of Research Fantasy presents our MLB DFS pitcher picks for Wednesday, April 18th, 2017. I'm sorry, that would be April 19th, 2017. I'm your host, Nick from CWE, on all of your favorite daily fantasy sites, and I'm here to break down my top three pitchers for this slate. This is a really interesting slate of games. I mean, when you're looking at the top 5 pitchers, maybe even the top 6 pitchers on the slate, in terms of FanDuel pricing, there's an argument to be made for all of them. I really think that you can see some potential in just about everything that they're doing, and it is a situation where you might be able to pick any of these guys and have good luck. It's not often that we have Kershaw and Bumgarner on the same slate. And for my top dollar pitcher today, I'm actually going to go Bumgarner over Kershaw. Again, it's not that often that we're going to talk about Kershaw not being the top play of the night. And I'm sure that there's going to be many across the industry who just aren't going to care to hear the talk about Kershaw not being the top play, and that's fine. And at the end of the day, I could be wrong, but I do know that there is an $1,800 price difference between the two. I would much rather have Bumgarner against a stumbling Kansas City offense that can't hit left-handed pitching right now over the Nolan Arenado Colorado Rockies. This would be different again if this was the Rockies' first game coming off of a Coors trip, where they're kind of experiencing that loss of velocity that comes with the hitting, the dip that comes in with the pitching as a result of the thin air at Coors. But this is a Rockies team that's cycling its way, much like the Diamondbacks, through the state of California. So they've kind of been in this area long enough that I think that they are settled in. They had a good showing last night. Double dongs, at least by Nolan Arenado. I went to sleep before the game was over. But with Bumgarner, like I said, you get a stumbling Kansas City Royals offense against left-handed pitching. I think our sheet showed that in 2017, Kansas City's WOBA against lefties is like 224. Now, it's not going to stay there, but at the same time, you start to reduce the amount of bats that you have in the lineup. Instead of Mike Moustakas, you have Cheslor Cuthbert. And I'm not trying to be insulting to the guy, but it's clearly a loss of talent there. Similarly, Eric Hosmer, who just hasn't been doing well as it is no longer as much of a factor. And then on top of that, Alex Gordon, who's leading off, is not as much of a factor. Bumgarner is going to tear through the left-handed bats, and you're basically looking at guys like Lorenzo Cain, Cuthbert, Salvador Perez, who are all capable hitters, but at the end of the day, I just don't like how it sets up for the Royals. I think I'm going Bumgarner. I'm not going to say Kershaw is going to get blown up. I'm sure on DraftKings I'll have my fair share of Kershaw-Bumgarner lineups if I can. I really haven't tried to make too many lineups over there yet, but that's where I'm going over there. Moving down the list a little bit, again, Zach Greinke, I think he'll be a semi-popular option against the Padres in San Diego. I have nothing against that. Dallas Keuchel against the Angels, nothing necessarily wrong with that, though it is a low strikeout team. Chris Archer against Detroit is interesting to me. Detroit has been hitting right-handed pitching very well this year, but Archer has been pretty dominant, number one, and number two, he stays pretty dominant at home. Even Rick Porcello is a guy I don't think you can look the other way with. But for my next play, I'm going to go with Julio Teheran of the Atlanta Braves. Maybe this is kind of like a pick that's a little bit because he's one of my favorites, but the Nationals lineup is a really up or really down lineup. You run into the situation where some days they're going to be right on point, and then the next day they just can't seem to string anything together. Teheran, one of the better pitchers, I believe, in Major League Baseball. biggest struggles are going to be with the left-handed bats, which are kind of isolated here with Eaton, Murphy, and Harper. I think he's capable of getting through those. I think he may be a little lower owned today, just because I think that the impression that the Nationals give a lot of people is that you don't want to target them, or you don't want to target pitchers against them. I'm really not there tonight. I think I'm fine with Teheran. I don't know if I'm going to have cash game exposure to him, but I will definitely have some tournament exposure to him. Now, truthfully, everything in me wants to say that Ubaldo Jimenez is a pitcher that I want to use tonight. I know that defies all logic, and I'm not going to go there necessarily, but let me at least explain where my mentality is at with that. So, pretty much if I had to wager a guess, if we've played 17 days worth of fantasy baseball thus far, I would have to guess that the quote-unquote top offense of the night has not produced maybe 14 out of those 17 nights. I mean, it was the Indians 2 nights ago. Last night it was the Orioles, who just couldn't punch their way through a wet paper bag. I think that everybody's going to see. There's a number of pitchers who have gas can qualities on this slate, but Ubaldo is a guy that people very, very often gravitate towards, and he's given up back-to-back 5-run games, and there certainly could happen because Cincinnati has a somewhat potent lineup, at least in terms of being in their home ballpark, and I think that's where the crowd is going to go. And my kind of take on this is that I think people are going to ignore the fact that Amir Garrett is still a rookie. They're going to see the fact that he has 2 very good outings under his belt, but he has 2 very good outings under his belt in Pittsburgh and St. Louis, neither of which are a haven for hitters. The Great American Small Park is. There's a reason they call it the Great American Small Park, because it's small, right? I'm not trying to treat you like idiots, because you're not, but it's not a pitcher. It's definitely not a pitcher's park. So I think this is kind of that classic letdown game scenario where I think a lot of players are going to be on, maybe not on Amir Garrett, but they're going to be on playing Reds bats when it should in fact be the Oriole bats, who I'm struggling to want to play, don't get me wrong, because that was brutal last night, but it might be that being the way to kind of play this thing out, especially in tournaments. That said, I'm going to kind of leave you with that. I think that there is some potential with a guy like Tyler Anderson, who hasn't shown well at all this year, but the Dodgers have some very serious struggles with left-handed pitching, and to boot, Logan Forsythe left last night's game after being hit by a pitch in the toe, and if he goes, that's, outside of Justin Turner, I'm taking Logan Forsythe over Kiki Hernandez and Scott Van Slyke any day. So that definitely lowers the potential of what this Dodger lineup is bringing to the plate. I don't mind him as kind of a sneaky play that a lot of guys aren't going to be on. I'm not quite confident in his ability to spin a nice game all the way through. But sometimes I think you just have to look at situations like that and say, okay, the setup here is that the Dodgers lose one of their righty bats against the lefty. They're going to have to put someone who's less talented in his place. And Forsythe against lefties is hitting second. So you've got an important spot in the lineup to fill. Maybe he was third, but he was a top 4 is the point I'm trying to get at here. I think it's a tough situation. Tyler Anderson could be a little bit sneaky tonight in tournaments. I think that's a great way to differentiate yourself, as well as with the bats. and targeting the Reds pitching as opposed to the Orioles pitching. Once again, thanks for joining us. Sorry this ran a bit long. I just wanted to kind of espouse what I'm thinking in terms of strategy. Feel free to comment. Let me know what your thoughts are on that. Subscribe to our YouTube channel below. Head over to researchfantasy.com. Sign up for our MLB mailing list. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at Research and Win. And join us again tomorrow.